Well, hello everybody. This is Louise Eddington with Cosmic Owl Astrology, and today I'm doing a special broadcast with my friend Mandi Rae from Ecstatic Astrology, and we are going to talk about the big event, one of the many big events that's coming up. That's the Mars retrograde in Gemini. And so I've got a couple of slides we're going to show, but first of all, I'd just like Mandi Rae to say hi, and she can say where you can find her. I was going to do it at the end, Mandi Rae, but let's do it quickly now.
Sure. Hey, I'm Mandi Rae, and I am from Ecstatic Astrology. And if you search those two words, you'll find me on just about every platform, ecstaticastrology.com, and then at Ecstatic Astrology or Ecstatic Astro on the social media websites. So that's my spiel there.
And so I'm going to share a couple of quick slides only for the dates, really, just so that people can get an idea of the dates. So let's have a look. Here we go. Am I sharing? Is it showing the slides, Mandi Rae?
It's showing the slide. It's showing your desktop as well.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, is it? Okay, there we go. Is that better?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So here we have some retrograde dates. Well, we're not going to spend ages on here, but if anybody just wants to kind of just look at the dates or take a screenshot, the important ones we are going to look at are the bolded ones, because this Mars retrograde coming up starts on October the 30th at 25 Gemini 36 and ends on January the 12th, 2023 at 8 Gemini 7 minutes. But there was the last Mars retrograde completely in Gemini was back in 1943 and into 1944, almost the exact dates and almost the same degrees, just a little bit earlier in the degrees. So we're going to be looking a lot at the history. Mandi Rae's looked back further than that as well. And we're going to come back to the slides a little bit when we talked about the Mars retrograde in general. But we're going to look at the USA chart as well, only because it is highlighted majorly by this retrograde. So, and we're going to look at the retrograde station charts as well themselves. So, right, so let me stop the share and let's just talk, because I don't like doing two slide heavy things. So Mandi Rae, this Mars retrograde in Gemini, there's a lot of extra bits that are going with it as well. It's going through eclipse season for a start, where we've got two eclipses on, well, one's just before the Mars retrograde, and that's on October the 25th. We've got an eclipse on November the 8th, which is election day in the USA, the midterms. It's also, we've just got the first Libra Venus Sun conjunction, or Venus star point. The first Libra star point since 1817 occurs on October the 22nd, just before Mars goes retrograde in an air sign, and Libra is an air sign too. So we've got all this air energy kind of going crazy. But I'm not going to give away all the notes you sent me. A couple of other things that Mandi Rae reminded me of. So what else is happening during this Mars retrograde?
Well, I just find it so crazy that Mars turns or stations retrograde in the middle of the two eclipses. To me, that just seems very significant. And at the same time, Jupiter is retrograding back into Pisces right in the middle. So we have the eclipse and then two major other happenings and then another eclipse. And it's like a sandwich there, of all of these astrological things happening. And then Mars is out of bounds. We talked about that briefly before we got on the podcast. And Mars being out of bounds is Mars in effect acting however it wants to act, maybe a little more strongly even. Mars really is doing its own thing, both the fact that it's retrograde and the fact that it's out of bounds. So an out of bounds planet has to do with the declination. And when it goes out of the declination of 23, I believe it's 23:27, maybe 23
It is.
degrees and 27 minutes. When it
Mm-hmm.
goes above that, it is known as out of bounds. And it's known to act more strongly. I think that's the best way to say it.
I think, I
Yeah, a
think,
little more
I think,
magnified.
I think eccentrically too. I
Yes.
think that's a good word for out of bounds planets. I always think of Björk, the singer, the Icelandic singer, because she's got lots of out of bounds energy in her chart, and she's quite eccentric. And so
It does imply a Uranian sort of feeling. I mean, the
it
fact
is,
that it is
yeah,
out of the boundary, you know. So yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And Mars in Gemini is pretty crazy anyway, really, anyway, without being out of bounds and retrograde, because Mars being drive and will and energy and the warrior and also the guardian. I like to remember he's a guardian too. And Gemini being the air sign and very much about communication and ideas and alliances. And what other words could you add to the Mars words and the
Trickster.
Gemini words? Yes.
That's the one that's standing out for me right now. I just feel a lot of this trickster and duality, maybe with Gemini being the twins
Mhm.
and having things. I think a few different options presented during this, maybe, or the need to research and think
Mhm.
about what's going on, and
Make
process data almost.
and make decisions, and all things like that. Yeah. And Mandi Rae also pointed out that Gemini is Mercury ruled, and we talked about the trickster, and Mercury is going retrograde during this retrograde also, at this almost the same degrees, but in the sign of Capricorn. So those signs will be in a quincunx to each other, which is a very awkward aspect also. So, and you had
Yeah.
some other things to point out about Mercury as well.
Yeah, especially the fact that Mercury is moving so much. I mean, we need to probably, it's a good idea to look at your own chart and look at where Mercury is and look at
Mm-hmm,
where Mars is in your own chart
mm-hmm,
during this Mars retrograde. But then also to look at where Mercury is moving through in order to kind of get the flavor of each part of the Mars
mm.
retrograde. So it's in Scorpio right now it's in Libra, and it will be until October 29th when, oh, do they ingress or does it turn retrograde at the same time Mercury ingresses Scorpio? It
Uh,
may.
I think it's the Mercury enters Scorpio the day before. So
That's like, of course, it's
I
like this
know.
boom, boom, you
Yes. Oh,
know.
yes.
The Mercury moves into Scorpio October 29th, and then Sag November 17th. And I'm just going to give you these dates really quick. Capricorn December 6th. Mercury turns retrograde in Capricorn December 29th. And then stations direct January 18th, just after Mars stations direct, like you said. And they're both at 8 degrees of each respective sign,
Mm,
quincunx. But yeah, there's some history there with Mercury retrograde in Capricorn during the Mars retrograde in Capricorn as well. Some
mm.
events in the world. I don't know if you want to dive into that yet, but that I found pretty significant. So you just let
I
me know if you want me to bring that up.
No, I think, yeah, you talk about your events right away. Then I'll share my slide that I put together for the last Mars retrograde completely in Gemini. So and
Sure.
we'll talk in detail about that one. So.
Yeah. Well, there was, and this one does fall around that one. There's a few different Mars retrogrades in Gemini that we can look at, but there are definitely some significant ones where they were fully in the sign. One of those is
Mhm,
43 to 44. And one of the events that I found was an earthquake in Chile. This was January
mhm,
15th, 1944, that happened just as Mercury was going direct in Capricorn and Mars was going direct in Gemini. So we
mm,
had a very similar setup in that time frame. And then, of course, you have the implications of war. And there was another Mars retrograde in Gemini, and during the Civil War. And let me look at that. It was 1860, I believe. That makes sense. Yeah,
65.
1864.
65.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
64,
it was
65. Yeah.
Civil War. Yeah. And the Civil War, I believe it started in 61, but around 64 through 65, we had Sherman's March to the Sea, in which General Sherman really burned a lot of the southeastern and East Coast. And I mean, that's not great, but it did turn the tide towards the Union Army. And that was a big turning point in that war. But there is the implication of war with Mars always. And it seems, as I've looked at Mars retrograde, there's always been, especially in Gemini, some sort of war thing going on. Even the first Seminole War in Florida began in 1817, November 20th of 1817, and that was American Indians, indigenous Americans, the Seminoles. There was a war with America against them. So there's always been that implication. So war is one. Then you have the implication of pandemics. Mars does rule that in traditional astrology. And in 1817, the same year of the Seminole War, there was the first cholera pandemic, which I found to be extremely interesting. And that originated in Bengal, and it reached Calcutta by September, which would have been around when Mars was ingressing Gemini. And, that kind of brings up the point to also take a look at the shadow periods on its way for its first pass through Gemini is something to note in your own life, maybe journal it. And then the retrograde, you go revisit that. And then again, the second or the third pass is the shadow after. So those are always interesting to note. And, I think with respect to Mars and the Venus star point, I found something else that was interesting in 1817. And it was Venus occulting Jupiter. And even though it's not a Venus star point, there's something interesting about this. It was the last occultation of one planet by another. And I believe this must be declination that I think that we could observe with the human eye until 2065. So there's always some like interesting thing that humans observe with a Mars retrograde in Gemini, it seems. There's always this data processing implications, science, you have it's air, it's communication, and then transportation. So transportation's another one that I kind of picked up on, and you did too. And I'm trying not to overlap with all. There's so much research.
Oh, there really is. And just, I wonder what degree that Venus occultation of Jupiter was at. I might have to look at that in a minute.
It was very late, and it was in Sagittarius. Yeah. So it was like 27 Sag. But that's Jupiter's home sign, and this Venus star point will be in Venus's home. So there's like all these little like kind of cosmic winks, from the universe. When you look back at the history of all this, it's like, okay, I can see how, this was the turn of the tide here, and there was another turn of the tide and another one, and then even the transportation aspect of it. Trains were a huge deal, especially in the 1800s, leading up into the 1900s before aviation. And so you had a lot of, like the 43 to 44, there was an Atlantic coastline passenger wreck. There was a wreck in Spain of a train. And then if you get into the later history, there was airplane things that happened. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that
I have some of that on my I have some of those on my slide. So let's have a look at this slide. I put some of the history of the last one together, because clearly this was right in the middle of World War II. It was right in the middle, really, 43 into 44. So, some of the transportation things I noticed, and I didn't put them all on here because there was just too much to put on, was the movement of people to the extermination camps in Nazi Germany. I don't even know if I put that Jews were moved from Rome into the camps. The Hungarian Jews reached Auschwitz, you can see at the end. And transportation, first use of helicopters, there was there was all kinds of transportation and air as well. There was, of course, I think this was the first war where we had, bombers dropping bombs on people because it was air in Gemini. And interestingly, at the moment, of course, with Ukraine, they're being bombarded with missiles from the air, and there's talk of providing them with air defense systems. So that's going to be very Mars retrograde, I think, if that goes ahead. Also, it's not quite a pandemic, although I think tuberculosis was. We've also kind of got the antithesis of that with the kind of remedy for a disease that was easily spread and that was affected so many, with the first antibiotic for tuberculosis, which was amazing. Then there's the Burma Railway, so transportation again as well. And then 444 British bombers attack Berlin. There you go, there's the air. And British RAF begins air bombing of Berlin. British Forces Broadcasting Service began operations in November during the retrograde as well. Also alliances, the big three, Stalin, Churchill and Roosevelt, met there was a few conferences actually, but that was one of the big ones because they agreed that D-Day was going to be in May 1944. And I think we all know that kind of turned the tide a little bit of the war. But I think, people can read the slide, but there's so much going on. Aerial dropping of supplies as well. So from the air again to resistance fighters. One thing I found most interesting though, especially because we have a war now, we have the Ukraine war, and it could escalate to other places as well, hopefully not. But at the start of the retrograde was really, or just approaching the retrograde in 43, was when Italy swapped sides. They got rid of Mussolini and sided with the Allies and declared war on their former partner, Germany. So it's like alliances switched, and the axis has changed, and it kind of felt like everybody was piling in on Germany, whilst Germany was also escalating their awful extermination camp activities.
Yeah, and right around this time, actually it was a Saturn-Uranus conjunction in Gemini with this Mars retrograde during the World War II. And I find that interesting simply because we are in the middle of another Saturn-Uranus aspect. It's not a conjunction, but it's a square. And which I find squares, conjunctions, and oppositions to be similar in nature anyway. You're on the square axis there, the grand cross axis. So you have these 90-degree angles to it. A conjunction, it is the start of a new phase. But this square that we're having is it's going to put a little bit, I think, more of a change energy onto this Mars retrograde. So, that was one thing, but this is a completely different, so we're going to, that's the great thing about history. I don't know who says it with astrology, is it doesn't ever repeat, but it does rhyme. And so you'll have these rhyming things that happen, whereas it may not be the exact same. That's because nothing else is in the chart,
But I like the rhyming thing, or the echoes kind of thing. And if you'll notice, on November the 6th, in 1943, the Soviet forces reconquered Kiev. Or
Wow, you can't get
Kiev
much
as they
more
call it.
rhyming than that.
I know. So it's kind of some of the same areas of the world that are being affected. Germany, we're allies with now here in the US at least, and Germany's had more problems because of the energy dependence on Russia and so on. So same areas are being affected. You talk of the Saturn. I'm just going to get rid of the slide. So if anybody wants a
Sure.
screenshot, quickly do it now. You talked about the occultation of
Venus and Jupiter.
of Venus and Jupiter. I've been tracking the fact. Oh, let me get rid of those. There we go. I've been tracking the fact that this year, while we're having this Saturn-Uranus square, we've had 10, or we will have 10 in the whole year, and 2 more in the early part of next year, occultations of Uranus by the moon. So we've got more occultations, which are like mini eclipses as well happening. And it just kind of adds to it,
It definitely does.
Yeah.
And there's also the fact that the nodes are there with Uranus. So the fact that the moon is occulting Uranus and also eclipsing at the same time is just kind of an exclamation point from the universe, like this is something to pay attention to. And
well,
Taurus being
the next lunar occultation is on the November 8th eclipse. So yeah.
Ooh, and Taurus being a supply chain. I mean, I've been really associating Taurus with supply chain and food, and then of course our economy. That's something we really didn't have going on in 1944 that we do during this specific Mars retrograde, and Gemini being commerce.
But they had rationing in Europe.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, they did.
So,
and I mean that, and Mars, Mercury and Gemini are commerce. So I mean it is how we move goods, really, if you think about it. And like you even mentioned energy. I can't remember what you were talking about, but it just kind of struck a chord with me about the Hoover Dam being, let me find it in my notes here. It was, I believe, planned during a Mars retrograde in Gemini, which I found very interesting. Oh, even the word computer was first used during a Mars retrograde in Gemini.
Oh, really? Oh,
yes. I mean, data, energy, communication. Okay, yes, it was 1928, December 21st. Congress approved the construction of the Boulder Dam, later renamed the Hoover Dam. So you've got, humans, technology, moving goods, how we communicate. And then what's interesting is how wars and pandemics also go along with both of those things. If you're going to, pandemics move with humans moving. Wars happen because, and you have to communicate during these wars. You have to move people during the wars. And so all of it is just, it tangles up together, and it's all one big happy family of how humans, I guess, kind of organize life, which is what Gemini really is, and Mars being action and how we act on that.
And I hope we're not alarming anybody that's listening. I do think it's going to be interesting, this period, but if we look back at the history, there was some good things came from the kind of necessary rethinking of how we do things and so on, and the new alliances. A lot of good came from the Mercury retrogrades as well. So I think you mentioned it, like with the Sherman's March to the Sea, back in the Civil War, and it led to the end of the Civil War and to to the North
Mhm.
winning. So yeah.
I kind of look at it like it's necessary to find the places that aren't shored up. And the only way you
Yeah.
can do that is, sort of with a Mars retrograde-esque transit. You're going to have to shake
Hmm.
the walls somehow to figure out if they can withstand an earthquake. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you'll never know. But then like you say, there are the very good things that come out of rethinking or
Hmm.
researching, which I think is a
Hmm.
big part of this, in your own life. What do you need to research? Look at what house it's in
Hmm.
and where it's at, and kind of get on top of it and get ahead of it. And it's very helpful. But the things, that humans have come up with during these times, I believe, let's see, the second most successful of the three Able space probes it was the first NASA spacecraft launch was
Hmm.
during a Mars retrograde in Gemini, October 11th, 1958.
Hmm.
Chevrolet entered the automobile market in November 1911, which was a Mars retrograde in Gemini, which gave two options because there was only Ford. And then you
Yeah.
had, okay, Chevrolet comes in, Gemini's options. So during this
Hmm.
time, we may get, and that may be the curveball that Mars throws you is, here's another option. Oh, I didn't have that
Yeah.
before. Now I got to think
Like
about which one to choose.
like maybe hydrogen fueled vehicles or something like that instead of just electric vehicles. Something like that could emerge from it. They're already kind of
Absolutely.
they're already in development, a little bit like airplanes were in the war, but they kind of had to speed things along a bit so they could have bombers that drop bombs on the enemy, and and Mars's
Yeah.
speed. So it's going to be fast development, I think, of things and ideas, and yeah.
And quite busy, probably.
Oh, very busy.
You
Yeah.
know, I do feel like there is one um kind of kink in that, and that is and maybe we can talk a little bit about the
Mhm.
timeline of what is going on with Mars is when it right
Mm.
now, actually, it's square Neptune. We're recording this Thursday, October
Yes.
13th. It's 4:15 in the central US. It's 3:15 where you are, right?
Yeah.
So Mars is square Neptune, and that can, I think on its first pass, which is where we are now, it's like, oh, kind of like this Joan of Arc, let's go. We have this kind of
Hmm.
spiritual direction that we're all going in, maybe even
It's like the
delusion that,
it's like the Crusades.
yes.
It's like, yeah.
And I'm
But
seeing that in
oh
reality with
yeah.
people.
Oh, me too. Yes.
And it can be uncomfortable, especially if it's not a crusade you're down with. If you
It's,
are not into that crusade, no one wants to go for it. So there's that. And then it's going to retrograde. And I believe November 19th, it squares it while it's retrograde.
hmm.
Um, when it stations, it's pretty much square to it. It's only a couple of
Yeah.
degrees away. So it stays
Let's let's
square.
let's look at that chart then right now. The actual
Perfect.
retrograde, the station retrograde chart. I set it for DC, and just for Mandi Rae, I used whole sign.
Yeah, I'm a big
It
whole
doesn't
sign
really.
nerd.
I actually think whole sign really works for mundane astrology. So
Indeed.
I'm actually been using we've kind of come from different perspectives, Mandi Rae and I, but I think that's good because we bring a lot to it. It kind of
Mhm.
brings all the things together. So here's Mars, for those who are not really up with the astrology, up in the eighth house, and stationing retrograde at 25 degrees 36. And here's Neptune over here in Pisces. But just before Mars turns retrograde, as Mandi Rae mentioned already, Jupiter moves back into Pisces. So Jupiter's really the ruler of Pisces. Neptune is associated with Pisces. I don't really use the modern rulers as much anymore, but Neptune's definitely Piscean in nature. So we've
Mhm.
got a lot of Pisces. Oops, sorry. confusion, kind of delusion energy going on, mass delusion. I think it's,
Mhm.
to be quite
Yeah,
honest, would you agree with Mars as well, squaring? Like,
totally. I mean,
yeah.
especially in Gemini, with it being,
Hmm.
what we think, how we communicate, how our
Hmm.
minds process things. And then you have a square to Neptune, which is and Jupiter, which are, like,
Mm.
but what if, what if this? And so you kind of
Mm.
it's almost like, look over here. That's what Neptune's doing instead of,
Mhm.
kind of us forging ahead. And then it can kind of almost, I like to put characters on the planets
Mhm.
and kind of think of them as people sometimes, and
Mhm.
imagine Mars being, the warrior, and someone distracts the warrior, and the
Yeah.
warrior turns around and goes and does something that maybe is not exactly, you know, great for whatever war they're in, but maybe
Mhm.
along the way, that warrior finds something that does help him in the war, and so it's kind of like this process of some of it's maybe distracting and disillusioning, and some of it maybe is along that way, how can you find your way,
Well, one way I look at it as well is that Mars often kind of cuts into things. I kind of think a lot of people's illusions and delusions are going to be shattered. And
Mm,
it's going to be quite painful for people. Somebody who they thought maybe was their hero, they're going to, like, the clouds are going to be pulled back, and they're going to kind of discover
yeah.
that the emperor has no clothes, or whatever is the expression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Mercury
Hmm.
being in Scorpio at the same time,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
Scorpio could be secrets as well, and there's a lot of these, I don't know, with the Venus, Sun, Mercury,
Mhm.
South Node, there's a lot of secrets that seem to be kept bubbling up to the surface during this time. I don't know, perhaps.
Oh, I think so. And then push towards the North Node of, it's time to kind of wake up, because the North Node is still conjunct Uranus and it's going through eclipse season. And interestingly, on that station moment where Mars stations retrograde, we've got this wonderful kite pattern here. I
Mm,
use Ceres, I think, and it's the midheaven, of course. So the top of the chart, the most public place. We've got and the moon will be in Capricorn. We've got this Earth grand trine, but look where it's all pointing to. Look where what makes it the kite. All this energy in Scorpio. I think there's going to be a big releasing of secrets. I think things are really going to come out through the
mhm.
retrograde, through the eclipses. I think I'm going to find out lots of new information. And I think some of it is going to be quite, Pisces can be quite depressed. So, oh gosh, sorry about that. So I think
You know,
some people are going to be quite, like, feel quite depressed about it all. Yeah. Hmm.
Totally. And
Hmm.
Scorpio, I tend to associate with the balance of power as well. Power,
Hmm.
empowerment, disempowerment, who's in
Hmm.
power, who's controlling things.
Hmm.
And with it being South Node eclipse, it's just happened right before Mars stations. There is a sense that someone's losing power or
Hmm.
having to give up control.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's actually a good thing that you can look at the mundane kind of macrocosm and then pull it into your own life, and where might it be appropriate for you to let go of maybe
Yeah.
something that you're holding on to that's not serving you, a relationship, a job, or
Hmm.
whatever that might be, that you feel like you
And
need
also,
to control.
I kind of think of Scorpios hanging on by the fingernails, going, "Oh my God!" I think we're going to be asked to just, like, you can't hold on to some things. Just you've got to let go.
Yeah.
Interestingly, by the way, Putin, if Putin's chart is right, his ascendant is 2 or 3 Scorpio. So,
Mm,
uh, the eclipse on the 25th is on his ascendant, and then we've got all this stuff as well coming right afterwards as
man.
Mars goes retrograde. So but we're not sure about his time. So,
Yeah, and we all know Trump has all the Gemini stuff as well. So he's got
Uh-huh.
the sun, and he was born on an eclipse, right?
He
In Gemini
was.
Sag.
Yes, he was
So
with Uranus conjunct his sun. So
mm, so
yes.
and that's what he's a Gemini sun, right? So Mars will
Hmm.
be retrograding over the eclipse
Hmm.
points and the sun, which and Uranus, which are all very significant,
Yeah.
indicating a little change there.
Hmm.
So just this chart is incredibly powerful for the station
It
retrograde.
is.
And I think the moon square Chiron is really interesting as well, because the moon in
Hmm.
mundane astrology is the people.
Hmm.
And there's some healing that needs to be done with the way, I think maybe you could even say Capricorn is government, the structures of government,
Hmm.
but definitely a healing, which may smart at first. It doesn't exactly feel good. Sometimes a Chiron
Yes,
transit, it can be sensitive, and that includes
exactly.
for the collective, so it's
Hmm.
not exactly easy, but it's necessary.
And I think the Earth Grand Trine in itself, it brings some potential for healing as well. But I think also perhaps some grief as well, some very public grief with Ceres right up at the top with the midheaven, because she is associated with grief and loss. And even to go back to for the example, the last war, we'll look at the last retrograde. There was all that loss, and clearly, 6 million Jews in the Holocaust, and so on. Huge grief, huge loss. Um, but also then the Allies also eventually defeated the Nazis. So there's both energies
There's the
in
dual
this,
nature
in all
of
of this, of
Gemini
Gemini.
there. Yep,
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
It's like the good
yeah.
and the bad, and one would not exist without the other.
Hmm.
And that's the important thing to, realize about the potentially harder parts of this transit is that,
Hmm.
yes, it may be a little bit like, "Ugh," but it also may be some good, some opportunity that
Hmm.
comes out of it. You can't have one without the other.
And a couple of more things about this chart. Mars is also stationing retrograde in sextile to Eris and in
Mhm.
quincunx to Pluto. So Pluto in Capricorn, who's finishing, he's heading out into Aquarius, though he'll bob back and forth for quite some time. But we've had a Pluto Eris square going on for the last 3 years as well, and those two are starting to separate. And Mars is activating that, and Eris is the goddess of discord. I don't see her as hateful as some astrologers do. But I think she reveals what what's going on behind the facade. I think she pulls down the mask, she pulls down the white picket fence. So I think there's going to be some big reveals in that way. The quincunx to Pluto is a big aspect of adjustment. They're very awkward to each other, but this is also where Mercury is going to station retrograde, right? So on the
Mhm.
Pluto. So
That's absolutely right.
I think the news between now and when Mars, well, it'll take a while for Mars to get speed up after it turns direct. I think we're going to have like this intense news cycle, I think, to be quite honest, of things being revealed and perceptions shifting and changing and illusions being shattered and so on and so forth.
Mhm. It
Um,
reminds me of the North Node in Gemini, which we recently just had.
mhm,
And that's that new, I feel like the news cycle really kicked up with the North Node and the eclipses in Gemini. And this can
mhm,
kind of echo if you have an eclipse in a sign, and then, very soon after you have something like a Mars or a Venus retrograde, it's worth kind of looking at the two, as they may kind of
mhm.
echo, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
So even the eclipse, what went on in your life with the eclipses in Gemini, and how is this Mars retrograde affecting that? But yeah, the news cycle
Mhm.
was insane with that. I feel like,
It was.
especially with the fake news coming up,
Oh,
and You
And that's
know,
Mars square Neptune, right, as well. So that's like,
yeah.
oh my God. Yeah.
But it's almost
Yeah.
like Mars kind of wants, like right now that it's square Neptune and then it stations retrograde. It's like, hey, you've been pulling the wool over my eyes, turns
Yes.
around and has to go have a word with Neptune, like I didn't really
Yeah.
like what you've been doing here. So
And
I really,
he is the truth.
indeed,
Yeah.
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 And I like that
Mhm.
Jupiter won't conjoin Neptune again in its
So
visit.
do
It's
I.
almost like dipping its toes back in it and kind of setting some things straight, before it leaves
Mhm.
all the way. But, um, if you look just a little past this, you can see how just after the eclipse is in on the 25th of October and November 8th, what you enter into is then Sagittarius season, which will
Yes.
oppose Mars, and then the
Yes.
full moon with Mars. And that's the truth,
Mhm.
it's almost as if there's this really beautiful dance, the secrets kind of come out, the things are shaken up enough for then when the sun moves into Sagittarius, the truth is becomes a big theme and everyone is looking at their own worldview, how they
Mhm.
believe, what they believe, are they secure in it, and so I find that really really interesting the way that dance is. It's
Yeah.
Scorpio, which doesn't really react, and then Sagittarius, which opposes Mars, with the full moon there. I'm really kind of excited about the full moon in Gemini, which is,
Mhm.
as much as it may do to like motivate and to make people passionate, there is a sense of nervousness I have about the full moon in Gemini because it's
Yes.
conjoined to Mars. What date is
And
that?
what,
That is,
yeah, and what degree is it again? I can't
here we go. Let's
remember.
see. It is December 7th at 6. They're both at 16 degrees. The moon
Oh,
16 degrees 1 minute, Mars retrograde 16 degrees 7 minutes.
oh, on my
So
Jupiter, that's fun.
yeah, me too. I have Jupiter at 15. It's very close. That's right. And my South Node, like,
And
okay,
on
what's
my
gonna happen? Maybe
on my
that's why I'm picking it up.
and on my husband's birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Everyone
Oh,
mark that date down. It's likely to be, at least full of energy. We can at least say that. There's going to be something
yeah.
going on that day. So
And you
it's
know,
a Wednesday.
I'd like people to remember that Mars can be quite rash. So I always like, just be cautious when driving on days like that and stuff, or don't drive unless you have to.
Mhm.
I'm not a fearful person, but that looks like a very rash kind of day. People making
Mhm.
rash decisions that they could regret later.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think the maybe the one helpful thing during all this, which typically I don't necessarily look at Saturn as helpful. I
Mm.
don't generally, but Mars will trine Saturn a
Yeah.
few times, and
Hmm.
that seems to be the
That
one grounding.
slows it down, grounds it. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
So there
And
is that at least.
so let's look at the station direct, January the 12th, 2023. And we get another Earth grand trine, or a couple of them. I'm not really actually going to count it that much because it's to the outer planets, to
Mhm.
Sedna. But those outer planets is actually, a lot going. Oh gosh, sorry about that. Every time I touch my mouse, it does that. That Sedna, Pluto Sedna trine from Capricorn to Taurus has been a lot about climate change. But anyway, we're talking about Mars. So we'll look at Mars. Mars at 8 Gemini and stationing direct. Let's look at, there's no huge aspects. He's in a trine to Venus. So yeah, but the
Yeah.
aspects are not very exact, are they really? So there's a little bit of an air grand trine, so more news, more thinking, more decisions. That's to Ceres in Libra at the bottom of the chart there, and Venus in Aquarius. But And anything you want to say about this one before we go? Jupiter's back in Aries. He's left Neptune
Yeah.
behind for the
Yeah, and
last
I
time.
like that
I
because
do.
that makes Mars the ruler, or it kind of the person pulling Jupiter's strings, if you will. Jupiter's putting a lot more energy and like backing Mars
Mm-hmm.
up, I think, with it being in Aries, because that's Mars' home sign. But the other thing
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at, which I find interesting, is Mercury, which is ruling Mars. So, that's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, Mercury is ruling Mars, it's retrograde, trying to the North Node and Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's almost a question. I feel like it's like, okay, what do you want? How do you want
Mm.
to build the world now? Because this is not
Yeah.
working. That's what it looks
Yeah.
like to me. And Taurus,
Yeah.
which is, our food, how we survive. Taurus is, the earth,
Yeah.
and Mercury in Capricorn, which is the structure, is
And t- and
kind of like this
and t-
question.
uh, and Taurus I see as values as well. You know,
Mm,
what we value and what our values are. And after what's been happening in this world for the last 2 or 3 years, and before even, but particularly the last 2 or 3 years, it's what do we value? Who do we value? And it's to get down to a more sustainable kind of energy. A lot of what's happened and what's going to be revealed, I think, through this retrograde is even more of how our systems are broken.
mhm,
For example, no matter what you think of Mr. Trump, his actions have revealed the holes in the system. He was able to kind of take advantage of things that were kind of gentlemen's agreements for
mhm,
hundreds of years, and not actually encoded into any kind of actual law. So I think those things are going to be revealed, and it's what are we going to do now? Like you said, what do we want? How do we want to move forward? Do we want to change Mercury in Capricorn? Do we want to change the laws, the actual laws?
mhm, mhm. And
The-
Saturn in Aquarius there, like we have to
Mhm.
innovate the structures. I mean, and
Uh-huh.
then Venus there. I
Mm.
mean, I'm glad Venus is in Aquarius during this, because it almost indicates there's some thought, some love being put into it. Sextile
Yeah.
Chiron, which is, a lot nicer, I
Mhm.
think, than the moon square Chiron in the station retrograde
It
chart,
is.
so
And the
that's really
moon,
nice.
the moon in Virgo, which is very much about detail again, Mercury ruled service. But it's also kind of about more humble, like, let's it feels like the people have been a bit humbled in this, and like, we don't all have to choose this chase this extreme wealth and power and so on. We can, be more content with a little bit more humble life, and a little less, a
Mm,
little bit more coming together and getting along, especially with the try that Earth grand trine to Pluto as well. It's kind of like, what's been revealed is saying, let's get down to basics. Let's get back to Earth. Let's get,
mhm,
you
mhm.
know. I'm hoping it kind of brings a bit of an end to the talk of colonizing Mars and places like that.
Right, yeah, it's like focus on where you put your feet right now, it's like that, what is that? "Stand in the place where you live." That's what it
Yeah,
reminds me of,
yeah.
That's what we all are kind of being encouraged to do with the North Node and
Hmm.
and Uranus. And
Yeah.
I've been saying this for a while, and I think actually it's really great the moon's in the 3rd house here,
Hmm.
because the 3rd house is local community,
Yeah.
and if you're going
I've
to
been
make any change, you have to kind of get involved. And I mean, I
start
would
local.
challenge people, have you been to your local city council meeting and things
Yes.
like that? It's
Hmm.
important. And maybe that's something we can look at in this chart, is the moon representing the people in mundane astrology
Hmm.
in the 3rd house, local community. And maybe we
Hmm.
have to start looking in our, as small as our neighborhoods,
Hmm.
the next door neighbors. Are you taking care of them? Are they taking care of you? and that sort of thing. I think it's important.
And kind of like neighborhood farming, community gardens, things like that as
Yes.
well, with all this earth. I've been talking about that for quite a long time as well.
Mm.
And this kind of, bring Virgo is very much really about kind of being useful and doing crafts and tasks and stuff like that as well. So it's got all that energy. I don't know if you saw the thing going around as we record this from what's his name, Captain Kirk, after his reaction to seeing the Earth from space.
Yes.
About the deep grief he felt, and about how he always thought space was exciting, and now he realizes that this is what's exciting, the Earth. This
Mm.
is what, anyway.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think it's also this um with the seventh house stuff. I'm just kind of looking at that too, with the
Mm,
relationships being a huge part of
mm,
this chart for sure. And if you look at it, maybe country wide, it's like, what is our relationship with the world, and how do
mhm.
we interact in that way? How does our government interact with other governments? Even as large as that, I think, with all this. And
Yeah,
in the Sibley chart, we have Mars and Gemini in the seventh, right?
let's look at that. There you go.
There it
Yes, we
is.
do. We've just had a Mars return as we record this. But Mars is stationing retrograde, pretty much conjunct that Mars, I would say, 4 degrees. That's close enough for a big Mars retrograde like this.
Mhm.
So, we're revisiting our own Mars in the USA for 3 times this year. And that's in the seventh house, traditionally the house of open enemies, right?
Mhm.
I'm not a traditional astrologer, but I do know
Yeah.
some stuff
I
about
think the
it.
12th house is hidden enemies and the
Yeah,
seventh
yeah.
house is open enemies. Yeah.
And so, you immediately think of this kind of Ukraine situation, which in some ways is a war between the entire West and Russia, but particularly the USA, I would say. And
Mhm.
so, what's going to shift and change about that? It's interesting that all the Scorpio energies in the 12th house.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's the United States hidden enemy? That's what I want to know. And it might be ourselves if you if you think about it. Who knows?
Yes, yes.
The call's coming from inside the house, right? That's the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
Well, it is interesting that our Mars answers to a Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the eighth, which the
Mhm,
things, the relationships that we think are very secure, our partnerships,
mhm,
which is the eighth house. I like to put our intense partnership in the eighth. I'm
yeah.
not sure exactly mundane astrology what that house represents.
No, I'm not either. No,
Debts.
not
I mean,
sure.
I know the eighth is
Yeah.
debts and other people's
Well,
money and things
it
like that.
shared finances. So, I think it's going to be a rocky time financially. I'm not saying we're heading into a deep recession necessarily. We could do. I'm not a financial astrologer, but that eighth house, is definitely going to be twists and turns, I think,
Mm,
in the monetary system. and
definitely,
it- but
definitely.
again, but again, even some good turnarounds as we approach it, as we're recording this. I think they just announced today that they were giving an 8% rise for Social Security to help those who collect Social Security. That was a bit of a surprise. I don't think that was expected. So
Yeah.
again, they're not always bad surprises.
Definitely not. And I mean, if you do think about it being cancer and our position on the world stage as a country that does tend to take care of other countries. Now, some
Mhm.
people might say we also go in and start wars, which we definitely
Yes.
do. There is that, but there is also a sense of nurturing. I think sometimes, especially when it
Hmm.
comes to humanitarian uh type issues. I never,
Yeah.
oh, my dad was a Marine, and he, I believe there was, it was an earthquake in the Philippines. I'll just remember him going over to the Philippines to help with after a natural disaster.
Mhm.
And that made an impact on me. Like, oh, my dad's job is to help the world. Of course,
Yeah.
that was my tiny young
Yeah.
brain's idea of it. And now you kind of grow up and you find out all of what the military does. But perhaps looking at it from the Cancerian kind of nurturing point of view, maybe that is a situation in which we are called to kind of help nurture the world. You hope anyway. That's what I hope for. That's,
Mhm.
kind of,
And the moon on the station is in the second house of kind of our own values and our own self-worth as a country and so on. And it's in Capricorn. It's kind of like we'll take the place as leaders, perhaps in a more healthy way than it has always been in recent
yeah.
years. Maybe we'll step up and be kind of the wise elder country. Well, or maybe that's my saggy optimism. Who knows?
I know, me too. I mean, heck, I'm looking at Jupiter retrograding into Pisces, and I'm like, maybe Biden will decriminalize marijuana, and it can actually make money
Uh-huh.
for the US. I think it's California's top GDP. Like, that's how
Mhm.
California makes their money, and our whole
Yep.
country could be doing that, and it's so insane to me. Certain little changes in values like that I look forward
Mhm.
to with the North Node and Uranus and
Yeah.
Taurus and Jupiter,
And
Neptune,
and
and Pisces. Yeah.
and the North Node and that being in the sixth house of service, usefulness, all that. Interestingly, though, all that Scorpio's in the 12th house, and President Biden is a 12th house Scorpio rising. So, maybe he'll come into his own in that. I think, yeah.
Dark Biden, isn't that what they call it? Dark Biden
Dark
rising or something.
Brandon, I
Dark
think, isn't
Brandon.
it?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up with all the memes, which is
Oh, it is.
another Gemini thing.
It
The
is.
speed with which memes get created, and we may be a meme tomorrow. We have no idea, but it's it's
Expect the meme generators are going to be on overtime over the next period, I think.
absolutely, absolutely. I just,
Oh.
and looking forward to like, from just looking at this chart, looking forward, I can kind of superimpose Saturn moving over the US moon
Hmm. Hmm.
very soon after. I mean, Saturn
Yeah.
moves into Pisces in March.
Yeah. Let's look at
So,
well, we've got
yeah.
the station direct chart.
Yes.
So
That's
by then,
close.
by then, Saturn will be nearly on the US moon. I have a really good feeling about the US, what it's going to come out of this with. I think it's going to be humbled, to go back to the whole humbling thing a little bit, and think we have to do better on the world stage and for our own people overall. But anyway, this is going to be huge, though. Mars
Mhm.
stationing direct on Uranus, I think. But I don't necessarily think that's bad either. I think that could be a real radical turn of events. You know,
Yeah, and radical information. I mean,
yeah,
that's like blowing people's minds kind of a situation.
yeah,
That's what it looks like.
yeah. Because of course, Mars stations direct at 8 Gemini, and it's aspecting sextile to the USA's North Node and trying the USA's South Node. So there's something big going on there, I think, for the USA, which is why we're only looking at the USA's chart,
Mhm.
because it has a Mars in Gemini and it's so affected by all of this. I think
Would-
we're going to get radical change in our governing and how we approach the world. Yep. Go
Yeah. Do you want to know what the Sabian symbol for 8 Gemini is?
Yes, go on.
It is a quiver filled with arrows, and it says, uh, cyclical process of human existence. We're shown the symbol of man the conqueror. It may be a conquest of outer nature or that of instinctual drives and the limiting power of the ego. So conquest is the
Ooh,
the key word for that. So that I find that interesting.
Mm,
You know, speaking of my military father and just people around me, I keep hearing rumblings of why don't we just go over to Russia and fix it
mm,
and finish it, you know, and you kind of have to like look at that and go,
mm.
hopefully that's, I don't think that would be very good, you know. That's kind of
Yeah.
the view of some people though, because it
Oh,
seems like such an easy fix, you know.
yeah. But it would
But
just
I
make it all worse, probably.
it would. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It would be that mind
Yeah.
blowing, you know, you don't want that to happen. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and that's the good thing about co-creation with astrology is you see this kind of aspect and you
Mhm.
go, how can we cool people's you know, maybe anger and passions a little with what we do every day, you know, when you're talking to people about stuff, how can you bring in a different perspective and
Yeah.
say, maybe it's about a radical change in the way we think about world relations and things of that
Mhm.
nature, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, anything else to say about the aspects on the station direct chart? For those watching, we're using what's called the USA Sibley chart. Not all astrologers agree, but a lot of what we're saying will apply to the planets, even if we have different houses. But of course,
Indeed.
if the Sibley chart is correct, Mars is going to oppose the ascendant of the USA just before it stations directly, well, a little bit before, which is going to bring a whole change in how we're seen in the world, in my opinion. It's
Hmm.
and it was in the war in the last you know, it took the USA joined the war quite late, probably you know, as the Mars, I think it was as the Mars retrograde was approaching. They changed their minds and decided to join in the war after Pearl Harbor, right? So,
Yeah, and I mean that's what this could reflect is a change in our
mm,
minds in some way.
mm,
It's like, you know, we go through this fall and you know, if Russia's trying to move into Finland, we may change our mind, you know, or something of that nature. Or Poland, you know, and that's the crazy thing about astrology too is
mm,
that there is a sense of what if, you know, if this, then that, and if this, then that.
mm,
And so if you look at the if something does occur, then this could represent a change in how we are posturing
mhm.
in towards the world in some way. But again, like you know, it's not something I've had so many transits at least watch so many come and go that I were, you know, scared of until I finally decided not to be scared anymore because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, doesn't help to fear it. I mean, you can be
Well, I
concerned. I think that's the right word if you want,
yeah.
but no
Or
fear here.
or even just aware, because it
Yeah.
is, you'll never know it. You know, we're throwing ideas out there, but you never know exactly how it's going to turn out. You know, you just don't. You
Yeah.
have no control over it.
Sam
You know,
Reynolds, fate has two arms, one is
oh,
yours.
yes, exactly. And USA is going through its Pluto return as well, so it's going through huge transitions anyway. It's also going to go through its Neptune opposition, so it's the USA is being, as a country, is, I think, going to be, you know, I wouldn't even be surprised if this Mars retrograde brought new constitutional amendments. Yeah,
Mm,
Gemini, the
mhm.
Constitution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Saturn on the moon too. I mean, I think of Sat when I think
Hmm.
of like the Constitution, it makes me think of Saturn for some reason because
Hmm.
it's the rules and
The
the
laws.
structure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Saturn moving towards that towards the moon,
Hmm.
and which will trine the US natal Mars out on its way
Yeah.
up, you know. So there could be, and I hope there is, honestly, there needs to be
Hmm.
some structural changes
Yeah.
and oftentimes you don't get that without like we said without shaking the walls you don't know you
Hmm.
know if there is a weakness there so yeah I see
Yeah.
so much potential as well. I mean Venus is
Hmm.
trining the US Saturn.
Hmm.
Venus has recently trined the Uranus, you know, so it could be that there is just some awakening as well of
Hmm.
the US in some way. Third house, community, Venus and Saturn there.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Jupiter in the fifth squaring Venus. Jupiter square Venus
Yes,
always is nice to me.
it is
It's
to
a
me.
nice kind of
Yeah,
energy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
So
like
that's
that too.
cool.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and square Jupiter, square Venus and Jupiter. I wasn't even looking at that. Yeah. Which
Yeah, it is.
definitely indicates laws. Jupiter is law.
It is. Yeah, Jupiter's kind of the higher courts, isn't it? And that kind of law.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn is the structures really of the
Yeah.
of the man-made rules. So,
Yeah.
we could have changes to the higher courts as well, please. We can,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Or an expand
Absolutely.
or an expansion of the court that's been talked
Oh,
about.
well, that's Jupiter. There you go. Expanding
Yes.
it. That would be really
Yeah.
nice. And
Hmm.
you have to also think about the fifth house being children as well. And that's been a
Mm.
contentious a thing, in the US with
Hmm.
recent laws and Supreme Court decisions and things of that nature. So
Yeah,
yeah, I could see how that would be the case. Yeah, and
definitely.
definitely with Mercury now, I didn't even realize Mercury is going to be opposing the US sun at the same time in the
Oh,
second
so it
retrograde.
is. So it is. And about to conjunct Eris, which is the same for a
Yeah.
lot of us, but it's in the second house of who are we? What do we value, as a country? So yeah, if if the Sibley chart is used. Wow, there's so much
Yeah.
going on. And I'm just
So
I've
much.
also I also noticed that Mars is stationing direct exactly square series. Now I I've done a lot of work on series and some presentations, and I'm trying to create a series masterclass if ever I get
Mm.
my stuff together. Um, but that's in the fourth house of the home, and series is about nurturing and how we nurture, and about grief and loss too. So there may be some grief and loss that kind of really wakes us up to how we nurture ourselves as a country, and how we like to be nurtured as a country. Um, and series is about coming back in alignment as well in many ways, with the cycles. And in Pisces, I would say that's the collective really. How do we align the collective more, just
Yeah.
look after, how do we look after each other? That's
Yeah, because Mars and Gemini can absolutely be division. I mean, we've already
oh
experienced the division
yeah,
and so it's
yeah,
definitely one of those, are we a house divided, kind of a
yeah.
situation, or do we align like you're saying?
Mhm. Or will, there's the moves with certain people in the USA at least. I'm thinking of Liz Cheney and Adam Kitzinger, and in Utah where I live, we've got a guy who's running as an independent. He was a Republican. He's trying to unite the Dems and the Republicans in the state running. No comment on what I think of him, but but
Right.
there are those but there are those moves for people to unite behind the Constitution, to unite behind the middle road of everything. So uh, maybe there's some of that. The division gets more highlighted, and then it's like we can't carry on like this. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, we have had so many changes in like, for instance, in the parties in America,
Hmm.
and there's just been, what is that even? What is a Republican? What
Yeah.
is a Democrat? All of that's been sort of convoluted and
Oh,
just
well, they
like,
used to be almost reversed at one point in
yes.
history, right? So,
Yep.
yeah.
And I think I looked at, I think during a Mars retrograde in Gemini, something major changed with the Republicans as well. So,
Hmm.
that's definitely, it's set up for that sort of a
Yeah.
situation. And well, I mean, there's even, I wonder what voting would fall under in
Mhm.
astrology.
Ooh, I'm not sure.
It does seem like a Gemini thing, though, making your voice heard.
Or a Mercury thing for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, yeah, voting rights are probably going to be a big part of this, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I wonder actually if Mars will sextile Jupiter. I think it will. It may. And that's
Mm.
something we need to look at. That would be a good, but it did on its way
Hmm.
towards its retrograde. And if it does again, that would be really interesting, but it may not.
I
But
can't
I mean,
remember what the
even if you
degrees
look
were.
at, yeah, I can't remember either, but Mercury opposing the United States sun certainly could lend itself to a voting rights change for
Uh-huh.
sure.
Yeah. I follow an interesting politician here in Utah who's trying to get crypto, not crypto, bit, um, what backs crypto, blockchain,
Oh,
blockchain, blockchain
yes.
voting, blockchain voting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Then you could trace it.
exactly.
That's
Yeah.
the thing. I mean, because if
Hmm.
if there is any sort of way for anyone to misuse anything, someone will.
Yes,
There's just
exactly.
no doubt about it. So you either have to make it where people can't misuse it and no one can take advantage the best you can, or just accept that there's always going to be misuse of
Mm.
in some way of something. Um, I even
So,
wonder how much the news cycle plays into it, who's misusing that.
hmm, hmm, that's definitely Gemini and Mercury, but well, we're already seeing a move away from, I'm just going to let us talk for a little bit. I think we're already seeing a move away from some of the big 24-hour news channels on, all of them. The viewership has dropped tremendously, and we've got all these independent YouTube news channels and all these kind of things. I think things are going to change with that. Who's trusted and who isn't anymore. Definitely.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
even I follow a YouTube weather person rather than, I mean, just it's
yeah,
it's much better. I mean, these people do their research and they care,
hmm,
rather than having a conglomerate news agency feed something at you all the
hmm,
time.
and
It's
have your
it's
advertisers kind of having a little bit of input in what's in there. So,
hmm
so, but to go back to our little conversation before we started, just for this retrograde, we've talked about there's clearly going to be a lot of change. There's clearly going to be a crazy news cycle. People's perceptions opening. We both think there's probably, having another surge of COVID for sure.
yeah,
Um,
some
because
transportation
Gemini's
changes.
lungs for a start. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
Pisces Neptune was putrid vapors in
Yes.
traditional astrology. So
Wow.
there's that. Yeah, for sure.
But of course, with science as well being Gemini, there could be some new discoveries to help treat it, other than the vaccines or whatever that we've already got. So, again, could work both ways. But for people personally, as Mandi Rae said at the start, you need to really look where Mercury and Mars are for you, but also where Gemini is, where this whole path of the retrograde is, where it is in your chart. Personally, I look in both whole sign and porphyry houses now. I look at both. I'm already seeing signs of my sixth health. So yeah.
Same here. I mean, you're Capricorn rising, right?
No, I'm
You're
28 Sag.
Sag.
28 Sag.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very late
Yeah.
Sag. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Cancer rising. So either porphyry, we definitely both have some of that 6
Mm,
12th axis going on. And
yeah.
that's a thing. But you'll see the themes start to pop up as Mars moves past this area the first time. And if
Hmm.
you're paying attention, you can kind of make plans. If it's in your first and seventh house, that's going to be your identity and your relationships. your second, eighth, it's your money and how you share it and how you make it and what you
Mm-hmm.
value. Third, ninth, it's going to be the way you communicate what you believe, your
Mm-hmm.
worldview. And then, well, yeah, fourth and 10th is home and
Home and
career, public.
yeah, possibly
Yeah.
parents too.
Parents, family, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then 5th and 11th is your own creativity and children and your inner child and what's fun to you and playful
Mm-hmm.
to you. And then the 11th is how you plug all that into society in the future and
Mm-hmm.
your plans and your goals and large groups of people. So, and I would look at both on the axis.
Okay.
I would look at, yeah, both signs, the Gemini and Sag area pretty much because
Definitely.
yeah, those oppositions are those are a big deal, I think. I mean, squares are as well. So if you have any mutable, which is Gemini, Sag, Pisces, and Virgo, if you have any of those prominently in your chart, yep. Yes, indeed, which we both do.
We both do,
Yeah,
yes, yeah. And
majorly.
yeah, but luckily because we do this all the time, we're already seeing the signs, so we know where it's hitting us. So, so
Indeed.
we know what to deal with. So anything else we've got to say about this? Also, just really look for I'd be really kind of mindful driving over this period. Small journeys, short journeys, the cars, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, if I wouldn't just be distracted driving, just
Yeah,
take very
absolutely. None of
yeah.
that. I've even seen recently, I mean, speaking of the transportation stuff, we've seen looking at the history, things with trains. It has been primarily, I mean, I've seen some stuff with airplanes, but it seems to be primarily ground transportation.
Mm,
Things that I've seen. So there's been a history of, and even leading up to this, when Mars was in Gemini, we had a potential train protest or where the workers was boycott,
oh
where they don't work. I don't
yes,
know what
yeah,
my
strike,
brain
a
is just
strike.
not strike. Thank you.
We're on
Well, it
strike.
was almost a railroad strike, and that
Hmm.
was Mars was already in Gemini when that was going on, and it was
Yeah.
called off at the last minute. But yeah, definitely, I've seen bicycle accidents already. This does not mean you'll get
Hmm.
in an accident, but it does mean to be
No.
mindful of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep your head. That's very Mars. Keep your head
Yes.
together while you're driving.
Yes, and your
Yeah.
anger. That's another, I mean, that's a good
Hmm.
segue into watching your own kind of like adrenals, your nervous system, and how it can get,
Hmm.
kind of, I don't know, irritated. Gemini is the nerves and the nervous system. And it's funny because I'm having my own self, lots of nerve pain. You can even see my ears red because my nerves are like
Yeah.
crazy right now. But yeah, I mean, it's like a thing.
Hmm.
And then
It's
anger,
probably and just a feeling of being a bit burned out as well. I think
mm,
is very likely. Yeah. Just like all
mhm,
my energy is depleted. You'll go and then suddenly crash, I think, a lot of the time if you don't temper
mhm.
things a little bit.
Yeah,
So,
because Gemini's
yeah.
buzzy and busy, and it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just back. Now, the other thing I think that I might say, and this is kind of one of the things I've been tuning into with the Mars retrograde in Gemini is, um, imagine having two choices and you can't make up your mind. And then
Mm.
someone takes one of the choices away. And then you go, wait a minute, that's the one I wanted. Why did you take that away? And I think
Mhm.
Mars retrogrades, especially in Gemini, but definitely always have the ability to tune you into your true desire. Like you may not
Yeah.
even know what you want until a Mars retrograde because Mars is desires. And so there is this sense of even through the maybe circusy nature of the Mars retrograde in Gemini, it's ultimately tuning you into what you really do want, and we're
Yeah.
really figuring that out.
Yeah, definitely. So if you can't decide now, then you should be able to decide at the end of it.
Yeah.
I
I
think.
keep telling people to imagine February, because that's the square point to the eclipses. It's Aquarius season,
Yeah,
and it's past the Mars retrograde. So where do you want to be in February? I don't think you should push to be there, but it's good to keep that in mind,
no,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And don't, just know that it really is a time where, well, just slow down and wait, be patient, because it's not all going to
Yes.
come to you. Yeah,
No forcing
I'm,
anything.
yeah, I'm actually just going to look at that Mars square the nodes. Oh, that's not till May next year,
Yeah.
May
Mars
23.
squares the nodes in May, but the sun, the full moon in
Mhm.
Leo, like that Aquarius time, because we are past the Mars retrograde. It's probably still
Mhm.
in shadow though. Is it still a
Probably.
Gemini till March, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
It's
it's a
going to be an
point of things get moving maybe a little in February more than they have been. I don't
yeah.
know.
But with regards to the Ukraine situation and the war, I wouldn't go into the depths of despair if things seem to be escalating, because the way it escalated, in at least if things do kind of have that muscle memory for the last one, the escalation that it seemed to happen during and after the Mars retrograde led to the end of the war. So
Mm-hmm. Yep, Sherman's March to the Sea, the Allied
yes,
turn, we've got
yeah,
turning of the tides and a pivot. And Mars and Gemini does indicate, be ready to pivot yourself. And then
yes,
probably reality is going to pivot in some way,
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's a little bit hang on to your hats, and particularly for people, I think mutable people like me and like Mandi Rae, we're perhaps more comfortable with this kind of frenetic energy, but also it kind of feels extra frenetic. So anybody who's very mutable, it might feel extra frenetic for you. Fixed signs are probably going to find it very uncomfortable, I would imagine. Would you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially with the eclipses and fixed signs.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah. So if you've got a lot in Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, then you might feel very on edge, because it feels like you're being pushed to change, and you're like, I don't want to, kind of thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, but it will pass, and we and we will move through it. And as we've talked about, we actually both kind of see potential for some really good things to come from what will be quite an uncomfortable period. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's kind of
Absolutely.
my
And
last
drink a
word on
big
it.
glass of water. Cool yourself down.
Yes,
That's why it's just lots of
yeah.
water.
Well, that's always a good sign thing with Mars. Kind of cool your jets a little. Just calm yourself down. Do whatever you need. Have long baths if that calms you down. Go for walks. That's always good. Get out in nature. But I'd be don't I would walk. Don't run.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't go like skateboarding or anything, like
Yes.
probably not. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh. Anyway, any last words, Mandi Rae? And to everybody new, they can find you at Ecstatic Astrology, Mandi Rae.
Yes,
So,
ecstatic astrology. And I just really enjoy talking about this because
mm,
it's always an interesting study of reality. So my wish is that people who do watch this would report back. Like, I know it may be hard to think about this video in like January, but I
mm,
absolutely love to hear about how people, experience these things. It helps us be better
mm.
astrologers. So please, or shoot me an email. It's ecstaticastrology@gmail.com. It's really easy.
Yeah,
Um,
do. And include both of us, Louise at
yeah,
louiseeddington.com, or even as a comment on the YouTube video, and I'll share any comments
definitely.
with Mandi Rae. Just do, actually, if you remember, do come back and let us know, because it's going to be, I think one of them. I thought the retrograde in Aries was interesting, but I think this one's going to be even more
Mhm.
interesting.
Absolutely. That's the Mars retrograde in Aries. I find that when I was looking at all the ones before in history too, it was always preceded by Mars retrograde in Aries when these wars kind of came to be. So
Mm-hmm.
what's funny about that is that, maybe we've already been through the start of all of it, and then the Mars retrograde in Gemini really is the turn and the rethinking,
Mm-hmm.
because throughout history, after the Mars retrogrades in Gemini, things calm down in those situations. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that this may be that kind of an energy. So no matter what, it does seem there's a good chance that things may start to calm down in at least a year or two, maybe. We'll see.
Yes. Don't you love it when people go, hey, when's it all going to end? I go,
Yeah.
well,
Keeps
how
turning.
long's a piece of string?
That's the truth.
Well, thank you for listening, everybody, and we really would appreciate, likes and thumbs ups on the video on YouTube. It's also going to be available on wherever you listen to podcasts. If you just prefer to listen, then you won't see the charts. So if you want to see the charts, come and hop over to Cosmic Owl Astrology on YouTube and watch the video to see the charts. And do give us both a follow everywhere. You've got Ecstatic Astrology on YouTube too as well, haven't you? So
Yeah, and I'm
yeah.
probably going to do a Mars through the signs, thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. I thought about doing the signs on this, but then I figured it was probably going to be long enough already. So I think we'll probably do that separately.
Indeed.
Mandi Rae gave a little overview with the houses. So
Yeah, I tried to boop, boop, boop.
yeah. But for now, thank you for joining me, Mandi Rae. I think we're going to do more together in the future. We both volunteer for OPA, the Organization of Professional Astrology. So if you'd like to give OPA social media a follow as well, we help out doing some of the social media for that, and that's how we became friends. So and we're both members of OPA, so check out OPA as well.
Yes, and thank you for
Yeah.
having me on, Louise. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure. So I'll see you all soon.